Hello and welcome to our session on Headless WordPress Simplified, choosing the right tool for the job. I hope you're all having a wonderful decode. We're really excited to talk to you about Headless WordPress and all of the optionality that you have as a developer in choosing what to use and how to implement it. I'm Jason Konen, Director of Product for our Atlas platform. And with me today is Teresa, one of our software engineers on the Faust.js framework project, and Fran, who is one of our developer advocates, who's going to run you through a demo of how to choose and pick the right tools for the right job. We know you have a lot of optionality, and you might wonder, why is WP Engine building a headless framework when there's all sorts of options out there? Well, we want to give you an opinionated way to get started and provide you bootstrapping to get going. Things like built-in block support, previews and authorization, and a templating system that allows you to just get going. So there's a lot of things you can do with our offering, but that's not all you can do. If you have a preferred framework that you would like to use, you can use that. You're not locked into anything with us, though we do have opinions on what is the best way to get started and get going if you have no prior conviction in what frameworks you're using. So I'm going to hand it over to Teresa here, and she's going to walk through a lot of the different optionalities of tools that you can use and what we do with Faust.js. Teresa?
Thanks, Jason. So as Jason said, we have an overwhelming amount of tools for various parts of this process. And many of these tools are awesome, and we'll touch base on a few and what you may want to do as you look into how to implement your project. But today we're going to talk about 3 of the hottest approaches for implementation: server-side rendering, static site generation, and incremental static regeneration. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. Starting off with server-side rendering, or SSR. SSR is a super popular web development technique right now, implemented by frameworks like Nuxt and Remix and Next.js and Faust.js too. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It is rendering on the server. Now, this is by far not a comprehensive list of frameworks that help folks utilize SSR. It's just a couple of examples that you'll likely see when you're searching around for SSR frameworks and trying to figure out what approach to take. But we will talk about just a couple to give you an idea of what SSR looks like and with different frameworks. So Next.js is a React framework that supports multiple rendering strategies, including SSR. Nuxt is a Vue.js framework that also supports multiple rendering strategies, including SSR, and it was inspired by Next, hence the similar names. Remix is a framework that uses nested routes to server-side render. And then we've also got Faust, which is the front-end framework that helps folks build headless WordPress sites in particular. So this is the one that my team works on. Faust lets you server-side render your headless page with WordPress data outside of the template hierarchy using Next.js file-based pages. So here I'm going to drop a quick link in the chat for more info on how Faust helps you retrieve server-side properties. So keep an eye on the chat for that. I'm just going to link back to some of the documentation that my team's made. But let's get right into these bullet points here. So SSR fetches data from the server on each user request. And this is in contrast to static site generation that we'll talk about in a second, where data is fetched during the build process. The server sort of processes the request, it fetches the required data, and then it generates the HTML content dynamically before giving it to the client. So what makes this awesome? Well, it's great for content that changes a lot. So different applications that use SSR typically have lots of user-based interactions that lead to a lot of changes on the page. So SSR is particularly suitable for those websites that have e-commerce or social media any content that changes frequently. Those sites are really going to benefit from at least some SSR functionality in the site. Folks who are really hoping to make that initial contact with the user just better should know that server-side rendering can be helpful with this because it helps pages to load faster, and it is great for SEO because the site can be easily indexed and crawled before the page is loaded, and that faster loading sites are favored by search engines in general. So that's a really, really quick and dirty overview of server-side rendering. It's great for folks who are serving up really dynamic and frequently changing content. Let's hop on over to static site generation and talk a little bit about that. So static site generation, or SSG, is a web development technique employed by frameworks like Gatsby and Quick, Next.js, and Faust.js. So we've mentioned Next and Faust. Both of those work together here to help folks with their static properties while implementing a headless WordPress site. So I'm going to go ahead and drop one more link. Please save it for later if you want more info on that. Let's move on to touch briefly on Gatsby and Quick too, because I'm sure they're going to come up as you're doing your research. Gatsby is a static site generation. Gatsby is a static site generator built on top of Node.js using React and GraphQL, and it's known for its extensive plugin ecosystem. And Quick is designed with React and other JSX-based frameworks in mind, with routing that's inspired by Next.js. So let's get into some of these bullet points. Just really quickly, some key features of static site generation that'll hopefully help you with your decision making. SSG generates static HTML at build time, as opposed to generating content dynamically on each user request like SSR does. And during the build process, the framework would pre-build each page and give it a static HTML file. So what's great about SSG is that it is a super performative, super fast for websites where content doesn't change too often. So imagine a website that doesn't include user interactions, but is more like a portfolio site or documentation site, or other types of content-centric websites where real-time updates are really not very crucial to the user experience. Static site generation is, in sum, really great for pre-generating that static content and is ideal for content that doesn't change much and can really provide some great performance and scalability in that use case. So let's hop on over to our last one that we'll cover during this talk, which is incremental static regeneration, or ISR. So ISR is a technique that combines some of those benefits we've just talked about with server-side rendering and static site generation. It's commonly associated with frameworks like Astro and Next, but tons of folks do both to some degree or integrate with frameworks that do. And this is essentially the mix and match approach with a few specific use cases to keep in mind. So like SSR, it allows for that dynamic content rendering, fetching data on each request to ensure real-time updates. And similar to SSG, ISR pre-generates static pages during the build process too. So it's doing a little bit of both. And that's the thing. So the magic comes from rebuilds and redeploys on specific pages. Say you've got a site that includes content-heavy sections and user interaction sections, maybe like an e-commerce site with feature pages or how-to guides combined with reviews or other dynamic content from users. So that's a great opportunity to use incremental static regeneration. So when content on a specific page changes for, say, reviews on that product, then ISR can trigger that partial rebuild and update only that affected page, rather than regenerating the entire site like in SSG. So pages that don't frequently change can still be statically generated. And that helps with some of the bottlenecking that you'll see with that technique. Incremental static regeneration can take care of some of that for you. But with most good things that combine multiple approaches, we do have to pay the price in complexity and learning curve here. So the combination of approaches here means developers need to spend some time not only understanding SSG and SSR, but the intricacies of ISR decision-making for the build and implementation process too. So it's a great middle ground solution. It combines a lot of the benefits of SSR and SSG, and it's great for projects that require a balance, but there is a bit of a cost with the learning curve and the complexity of implementation. So thanks for listening. That's a very quick conversation about rendering using these three approaches. I'll pass it on to Jason for a talk on recent customer experiences using our higher tech stack.
Thanks for that, Teresa. We know there's a lot of different options when you're building headless WordPress sites. We hope we've provided you some insight into when and where you can use these different options. We've also provided you our opinionated framework in Faust.js. If you have any questions, we have a team of experts that are very active in our Discord channel, which we'll link to in chat. We'd love you to join the community. And we also have a lot of people contributing code to the Faust.js project. So we'd love your insights. We'd love your PRs. Join us as we continue to push the boundaries of headless WordPress together. And now I want to talk about one of our customers' experiences when they adopted headless WordPress. They recently ran ads during the Super Bowl. They also did this last year. And as you can see here, when they ran these two ads, they had a massive influx of traffic, and their site didn't bat an eye. It was incredibly resilient. Over 29 million requests during those two ads when the Super Bowl was airing. That's incredible. It shows off the power and scalability of headless WordPress. This really puts to the test the scalability of headless WordPress. Over a minute, you can see how many requests came in. And at its peak, it was 75,000 requests per second. That's astonishing. And that's the second year that this has happened. So we know that headless WordPress is powerful and that it can stand up to the biggest scale that you could ever throw at it. So with that, I want to transition this over to our wonderful DevRel colleague, Fran, and he's going to talk through how to build this site, how to get started with our entire tech stack. As I mentioned earlier, what we provide out of the box is a way for you to easily do things like provide block support, have previews and auth built in out of the box, and have a templating system that makes sense to the WordPress developer. Fran, show us what you got.
Howdy, y'all. I'm Fran with the developer relations team here at WP Engine. And today I'm super stoked and excited. Why? Because I'm going to walk you through a demonstration on how to create a headless WordPress site. We're going to use Faust.js, the headless WordPress framework built on top of Next.js for a seamless developer experience. We're going to use WP GraphQL for the API layer to consume the data from WordPress. And we're going to deploy this all on Atlas. Let's dive right in. I've already spun up a WordPress site on WP Engine, and the two main plugins that we're going to need to decouple our WordPress site is WP GraphQL and Faust.js. WP GraphQL is a WordPress plugin that turns your WordPress site into a GraphQL server, and Faust.js is a plugin that, in conjunction with the Faust.js NPM package, it's a WordPress plugin that enables a decoupled front end to authenticate with WordPress through GraphQL mutations and REST API endpoints. Now, it's the bridge between a Faust.js powered front end application and a WordPress backend. You can simply go to the Add New Plugins page, search for them, install them, and activate them. Now that this is done, we have a site that is decoupled and ready to be consumed on a JavaScript front end. Let's go ahead and get that Faust.js package running. Let me navigate over to the Faust.js docs. And we're going to go to Get Started with Faust. We're going to go ahead and copy the npx command here for the utility command. Open up my terminal. I'm going to clear this all out. And then I am going to change the directory into deco-2024. And then we're going to paste in that command. We're going to name this decode demo. And what it's doing now is pulling down all the packages and dependencies that it needs to have a Faust.js project. Next thing we have to do is change directory into the one we just created for the Faust project. And that's the decode demo. And then we're going to open up Visual Studio Code. Okay, and we're going to change this environment variable folder, and we're going to just rename this to .env.local. And we're going to paste our environment variables there. The next public WordPress URL will go here, and our Faust secret key. So let's go ahead and do that and connect the two. Jumping back over to WP admin. I'm going to grab my WordPress URL here. Connect that here into this file. And then I'm going to uncomment this key and value pair, and we're going to put the secret plugin here. And this can be found over in your WordPress admin in the Faust.js settings. So let's jump over back to the WordPress admin and grab that secret key. Now I'm in the Faust.js settings page here, and notice that it's asking for a front-end site URL in this field. Now this is where your WordPress site is going to redirect to on your front end. So in this case, we're using Faust, and we're going to be doing this in the development server of Faust.js, and that is offset to port 3000. So the URL will be http localhost 3000. And then here's our secret key, and we're going to take that, we're going to copy that, and we're going to paste this value here. And just like that, we should be good to go. Now this is connected from my WordPress backend to this Faust front end, so let's spin it up and give it a try. Going to terminal here. We're going to clear this all out. Hit npm run dev. And then we're going to go to the browser, like I said, off localhost 3000. And there we have it. The Faust.js site is pulling in the front page template in its templating system that mimics WordPress onto the front end. Stoked. The first feature I want to go over in Faust.js is previews and authentication. So let's jump back into the WP admin and demonstrate how this works. In a headless fashion, Faust.js sets this up out of the box seamlessly. Let's test this out and go over to post and see how this works. So as a user or a content editor, I want to be able to edit a post, and see what it looks like before it goes live on the internet. Now, in the authentication flow with Faust.js and Headless WordPress, the process begins with the user initiating an authentication request. Now, the goal is to obtain an authorization code from the Faust WordPress plugin, which we downloaded, which acts as a temporary token for requesting further tokens. Now, Faust.js then uses this auth code to request both a refresh token and an access token from the Faust plugin. The refresh token is securely stored in an HTTP-only cookie to safeguard against client-side script access, ensuring it's used solely for renewing the access token upon expiry. Now, the access token essential for authenticated request is stored in memory. This setup does enable secure and efficient comms between your app and the Headless WordPress environment by leveraging short-lived and long-lived tokens for ongoing authentication. Now, this strategy is called redirect-based authentication, and it's the default auth method, so there's no config needed. We just needed to wire this up and hook this up, which we already did, and let's check it out. So if I edit this post, let's just put exclamation marks, go over to the preview tab, and we're going to preview in this tab here. And boom, there you have it. It gets a token and knows that I've already logged in WordPress. I'm an authenticated user, and it showed me the previewed content from the WordPress backend. Stoked. There's another strategy for auth in Faust. The second one is called local-based authentication. Now, this strategy does involve the user initiating a login request from the Faust application via the useLogin hook. Now, upon successful login, useLogin returns an auth code used to request a refresh and access token, thus completing the login process. Now, this strategy is excellent for use cases where you want to support a more white label or login register experience. And this strategy routes an unauthenticated request to your specified Faust.js login page. So let's go ahead and see how this works. What I'm going to need to do is go to Visual Studio Code, and we are going to drop a file in the pages directory called login.js. And within this login file, we're going to grab some code here, like so. And this code is essentially using the use logout and use auth hook to grab authenticated user data and then show them that data that an authenticated user would see. So let's go ahead and see this work on the front end. I'm going to cut the server and then start it up again. And we're going to go back to the browser. Let's go to localhost 3000. Whoops. And then we're going to go to the login route. Okay, so I've already logged in, so it shows my username there and the post, which is hello world. That's all we have, the title of the post. And then let's see what happens if I actually log out of my WP admin. So back here in my WP admin, we won't update those changes. I'm going to log out here. Okay, now if I refresh this and try to log in, it should redirect me, there you have it, to the WordPress login page for that more white label authenticated strategy. The next feature I want to talk about in Headless WordPress with Faust and WP GraphQL is WP GraphQL for content blocks. Now, I've already installed and activated the plugin, and it's a plugin that extends the WP GraphQL plugin to support querying Gutenberg blocks as data. And Faust also supports that out of the box. So let's see how this works. If I go to a post here, and I've already implemented some data in my posts here, and I am using the block editor, as you can see. Now on the front end, on Faust, all I have to do is wire up a couple of files here, which I already have. This one is a component called core paragraph, with a fragment that defines the property of the component that we're pulling the block data out from WP GraphQL. And then, of course, all I need to do now is create a page component. So I will do that. We can call it blocks-page.js. And then let me get some code in here to get this to run on the browser. This should work, so let's check it out. Going over to localhost 3000. Let's go to that blocks page route. And there you have it. I have my block data being pulled out from my WordPress backend onto my Faust.js front end. The last feature and functionality I want to talk about before we deploy to Atlas is advanced custom fields and WP GraphQL for advanced custom fields. As you can see, I'm back in my WP admin and I've downloaded the necessary plugins for it. It's WP GraphQL for ACF and ACF. So let's do a really simple example here to pull out custom content types and custom field data from WP GraphQL into Faust.js. First thing I want to do is go over to the ACF page here, and this is all populated after I download those plugins and activate them. And let's create some new field groups. So I'm going to add a couple of field groups here. In this case, let's try to have a list of movies with the title, runtime, synopsis, movie image, and movie quote. So I'm going to go ahead and do movie. Oops, forgot my field group title. Movie fields. And we're going to call this movie title. Field name is going to be movie title. And then we're going to have this show in GraphQL. That's already checked. Perfect. And we have our movie field groups established here. Now let's make a post type so that we have a menu item here to populate these fields. So let me go to post types. And we're going to add a post type, and we're just going to call this movies. Movie. Okay, we're going to make this public, and then on the advanced config, we definitely want to show it in GraphQL. Okay. And we're all good to go there. We just need to save the changes. Now, if we go back to field groups, we can click on this and make sure that this is set to the location of movie. All right. Our fields and custom content type is all set up. Now, let's go ahead and make sure it works in the graphical IDE to query for this data. And then once we query for that data and see that it works properly and we get back the response that we want, we can go ahead and consume that data over to our Faust.js front end. Now, let's go over to the movie post types, and for the sake of time, I've already pre-populated here some data of my two favorite movies, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, with the respective fields and their runtime, synopsis, everything that we've created for the custom fields. And then we also have, let's see here, Dumb and Dumber as well. Let's go ahead and go to Graphical IDE to make sure this works. So if I open up the Query Composer and look to the left-hand side, I can now see that I have my custom post type with my custom fields in the GraphQL, WP GraphQL server. So movies have nodes, and within the nodes, there should be the movie fields, which is right here. And then let's grab our data. Let's get the movie quote, movie title, runtime, synopsis, and the movie image. which should have a node, and then the media source, media item URL, excuse me. And then if we press play, there is our data in JSON format. Perfect. This does work. Let's go over to the Faust.js front end to make this work and create a custom template using its templating system. Now back over in Visual Studio Code, before we make a custom template with our advanced custom fields and our custom content type from WP GraphQL from our WordPress backend, let's just quickly go over, for those of you that don't know, the WordPress template hierarchy, which it's a system that WordPress uses to decide which template files to use when generating a particular page on a WordPress site. Now, this hierarchy is designed to provide a flexible and efficient method for determining the layout and structure of a page based on the type of content being presented. Now, in Faust.js, this mimics the WordPress templating system, but within the JavaScript ecosystem, and the template resolver works by sending a preliminary GraphQL request for the given URI in WordPress. Then the response includes data like our ID, slug, content type, which is then used to determine what possible templates are given for the URI. So let's see this work in action. The first thing I want to do here is, from the boilerplate code we spun up, we see a WP-templates directory. Now, we made a movies custom content type with advanced custom fields for those movies. And what we're going to do is create a file first called, let's call it single-movie.js. And we're going to grab some code and input that into this file here. All right. Now, this code is a basic React component in Faust.js, and it is a function that grabs the data from our WP GraphQL server and our custom post type and advanced custom fields, and then renders it onto the browser using the queries down here, and then grabbing that by its variable, which in this case is the database ID. Now, the next thing we're going to have to do in order to make this actually work is we need to go to the index.js file, and this is the file where the template resolver figures out which template it wants to send back to the user to show the proper data closest to that possible template. And in this case, we want to import movies, the single movie file from single movie, and then the key and value will be as such, single movie as single movie, single dash movie as single movie. Okay, this is all wired up. Now, once I run the dev server and hit the browser, the catch-all route in the pages directory of Faust, which is this right here, should grab that and resolve the actual template that we created for the movies. Now let's go check it out. I'm back in my WP admin after wiring up the template custom made for the movies data from our WordPress backend, and let's see if it's working. We've run localhost 3000 and that's up and running. Let's hit this one first. Let's look at Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Go over to the permalink. Stoked, it's working. I've got the title, I've got the runtime, the synopsis, the quotable, and the actual image that I've input. Now let's go back and make sure the other one works. And there we have it. That works too. Awesome. Now please forgive the CSS. You can style this all in your own way. But now let's deploy this to Atlas. I'm back in my WP Engine user portal here, and I've already clicked on the Atlas option. Brings me back to this main Atlas page, and on the top right, I'm going to hit Create App, and it has two options: start with Blueprint or pull from a repository. I'm going to pull from a repository since we've already pulled down a Faust.js front end and then installed a WordPress back end. So I'm going to go continue. And it gives you a selection here of 3 remote repositories. I've already authenticated and given permission to WP Engine to connect to my GitHub, and that's what I'm using. We're going to select a repo here, and the repo that we want is the Faust paginate test. Okay. And then we're going to hit continue. I'm going to choose US Central as my environment server for this region because I'm in Texas. And I'm just going to go main and call the environment app name. And I already have my WordPress instance here. If I wanted to create a new one, I can set up my own WordPress environment, but I already have one. So this one is going to be the Smart Cache one that we created. And then of course, I've got to add my key and value pairs for my environment variables, which in this case are the next public WordPress URL and the WordPress URL for the value. And we're all set. We're going to hit create app. And this pulls down a build container to build the code in, and then it will deploy onto Atlas, onto this CDN. Now, while we're waiting for this to build here, the cool thing is about Atlas is that I can use any front-end framework I'd like to. I do not have to use Faust.js, but for this demo, since it's the easiest and best way to start a headless WordPress project, as far as the front end's concerned, we are using Faust here. Success, your app is live. Stoked, this works now. Let's hit this URL. And there's my front page with all the data from my front page template being rendered. Now, let's take that path that we had with the custom fields and custom content types from WP GraphQL, and let's hit that path with the movies and the custom content type and ACF data and see if that works too. And boom, there it is, it works. Stoked. Now I hope you have a better understanding of building a headless WordPress site with Faust.js and WP GraphQL and its extensions and deploying on Atlas. If you want a deeper dive into the actual code and tutorials to deploy different frameworks on Atlas, please visit our DevRel site and join our Discord. And until then, happy coding.
Well, that was fantastic, Fran. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, join our Discord community and ask questions and participate in everything that we're doing here. We're all better together. I want to thank Teresa and Fran for their time today, and most importantly, your time in viewing this today. I hope you have a great rest of your Decode experience, and we'll see you soon. Bye.